In this tutorial, I want to show you my favorite light, the best light in the world, and it's daylight, and I call it garage light. And it's basically where you've got your figure in open shade and the light bounces into their face. It's a beautiful flat light. It's perfect for beauty lighting. It's also perfect for character portraits, and I think it's one of the best types of lighting that you should try and master. So basically what it is where you've got some open shade, say under an awning or in a garage. The light comes down from the sun, hits the ground and bounces back up into the shade, creating beautiful fill light, a beautiful even light because it's reflected light. You have your figure just in the shade, the light comes down, bounces up and creates this fantastic, beautiful, soft fill light. Now, if you're shooting and the ground surrounding your model is, say, sand or a warm light, the light is going to have that color cast. So that's great when it's warm light, but sometimes you might be shooting, say, around grass. So the light that comes up is going to create a green cast. So you want to avoid that, and the way to do that is to use a reflector or a white sheet on the ground. So then when the sun hits the sheet, it's bouncing beautiful white light up. When you've got black surrounding your figure, say a road, the black actually absorbs the light, so it's cutting back light, and you're going to have less light coming in. So again, place a reflector under your model, and so that the sun will come down, hit the reflector and bounce beautiful soft light back up over your model. So ideally you want to look for areas where you do have a lovely light coloured concrete or ground or a sand colour that's going to give you a nice warm fill light, and try and avoid grass or green painted concrete. And I think this light, again, if you're working in full sun or midday, this is the go-to lighting situation, because you're always going to get beautiful catch light in the eyes. You've got a situation where the light is reflected and it's so soft that it fills in lines and is really perfect for beauty lighting. The other thing that it does is, because you're exposing for skin tones that are close to the edge of the shade, so you're getting all the beautiful light pumping in, your background tends to go a bit darker, so it gives a studio look without having to go into a studio. All right, so we've got Orazio here that I found on the street. He's agreed to pose, and so I'm going to use this classic garage lighting, which is great because it's good beauty lighting, but I can use it in another way. If I wanted to create an even stronger look, I can work with the sun. So what we've got is the sun's at such a good angle, it's like a beauty dish coming down on his face, and we're picking up on all the beautiful detail, and it's such high contrast light that it looks amazing. So if I expose on the skin tone, the background is going to go to black, and then I can move him back and get a softer look. So basically I'm going to expose for the skin tone, and let's just step back a little bit. And the other beautiful thing is when you've got dark eyes and you pump a lot of light in, it actually, like the catch lights in his eyes look incredible, and it makes the eyes lighter, so you're not just seeing brown, you're seeing all the flecks and all the colours, and eyes look beautiful this way. So I'm just going to get him. Guarda me, metti le mani nelle tasche, bravo, bravo, così, e guarda me, giusto me. Fermo, bravo, bravo. All right, so a little bit of direction there in my very basic Italian.
So I'm focusing on the eyes and I'm exposing for the skin tone. And I'm getting quite a high reading, so there we go. And basically, sun is very hot, and but now we've got, so what I've got is he's well lit. The whole background has gone to black.
So you can see in this image I've shot using my 70 to 200 lens, and the ISO is 100 at an f-stop of f2.8, and my shutter speed is 1/1600th of a second. So you can see that the sun being quite high has, his eyes are a little bit in shadow because the sun is coming down, and it casts a shadow where his eye sockets are. So it's such a hard contrasty light that it causes some hard shadows. Now, the way that if you wanted to reduce these shadows, you could use a fill board and fill back, and that would give you lovely catch lights in the eyes. Or there's a better way, you could just scooch him back into the shade and use garage lighting.
If I want now to create something where I get more texture and more detail in the background, we're just moving back. So coming back now, scooching back, now that he's in the shade, basically the contrast is going to be a little less, but we've got the light coming down and it's bouncing up and filling in his face, and we're going to get a slightly different look, a softer look. Guarda me. Bravo, bravo. Okay, so quite a bit different now in the look, and I'm getting now much more detail.
So here you can see when I move Orazio back into the shade, there is far less contrast in the light because he's out of the sun, so it's looking far more balanced overall, but my settings are still the same as they were when he was in the sunlight. So this means that his face, the skin tone, is underexposed. So what I need to do is open up my exposure to brighten up his skin tone. Now, I'm at f2.8, I'm wide open, so I can't open up my f-stop anymore. I've got a couple of choices. If I want to keep my shutter speed the same, I can increase my ISO, and that's going to brighten the overall exposure, or I can reduce my shutter speed, and I've chosen to reduce my shutter speed to brighten up the skin tone.
Mettiti un pochettino, bravo, bravo, e guarda me, bravo. And he's he's staring me down as only a Sicilian man can. And when you've been stared down by a Sicilian, you can do anything. Guarda me, bravo. Bravo, look at that look, that's defiant, that's fantastic. Judith, bravo, così, così, bravo, bravo.
So here you can see I've dropped my shutter speed to 1/200th of a second. I've kept my ISO the same, and I've kept my aperture or f-stop the same. And you can see now that we've got a beautiful skin tone on Orazio, and have a look at the catch lights in the eyes. And so now we've got this lovely garage lighting. So the sun is hitting the pavement in front of Orazio and bouncing into his face as fill light. So it's a lovely, flat, even lighting, which is quite crisp. So it gives good contrast, and it's the perfect lighting for portraits.
And that's fantastic. So we're getting like a bit of spill in the background and a bit of detail, and it looks amazing. Fantastic.
Okay, so let's take a look at a few different ways that we can edit this image. So I've got the image opened up in Lightroom in the develop module. First thing I want to do is just make sure my white balance is okay. So I can try the auto function in Lightroom, which looks pretty good. It's not a huge difference. There's before, there's after, or I can try and do a click balance on a neutral area. So what I like to look for is a tone that is represents mid-gray or an area of white that isn't brightly lit or overexposed. So I'm going to go with the white area and just do a little click balance there, and it pretty much looks the same as what Lightroom did as an auto. So I think that looks pretty good. The next thing I want to do is just make sure that my image is straight, and I can see looking at it now it's leaning towards camera right. I wasn't shooting this on tripod, I was handheld. When I'm shooting, what I try and do is look through the viewfinder, and I have a grid when I look through the viewfinder, and I try and line up my verticals to make sure that they're straight. So in this instance, I think I was just getting into the shoot, and I sort of the camera moved a little bit. So it's generally why I like to shoot on tripod, because it helps me keep my images nice and straight. So what I'm going to do is just tweak that. So if I hit the crop overlay tool, that little square there, and just come up to one of these corners, you can see that you get the two-sided arrow. And if I just hold down my mouse, I can now rotate, and you can see that you've got all the little grids there on the screen, and I can line up my vertical and make sure that that's straight. Now the problem is, I don't think that this building is is very straight, so I'm going to have to kind of do it by eye and split the difference. So I'm going to line up the edge of this archway here, and I think that looks a lot better. So let's have a look where we started. Yep, I think that's pretty straight. The next thing I want to do is just, the image overall looks well lit. I think straight out of camera it's pretty good, but I just want to push it a little bit further and give it my own sort of look and style. So the first thing I want to do is just drop the highlights a fraction, and that's just taking care of this area. I don't want my eye to automatically go to the brightest point. There's not a lot I can do about it because it was that little slither of light, so I'm just going to drop it down a fraction, being mindful not to go too far, because if I go too far it tends to make the skin tone look a little bit muddy and dirty. So about there is good. The next thing I want to do is just slightly open up my shadows just a fraction, and then I'm going to hold down the Option key or Alt on a PC over the black, and just sliding my slider to the left until I see a good black point. About there looks good. I'll just check it. So we've got before and after. That's looking pretty good to me. I'm going to bring in a little bit of clarity, and you can see that just bumps up the contrast in the midtones, and I think it gives the shot what it needed. It's also, the light was really flat and even, so you can afford to have some contrast. So you can see before it's kind of flat and a bit wishy-washy. Once I bring in that contrast in the midtones, which is what clarity is, I think it really makes the image pop. It's also bringing out the texture in all the stonework here and in the background, even though that's all being thrown out of focus. I think that really, and it makes him really stand out. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I got my blacks, and the last thing I want to do is just drop my saturation a little bit, which just takes away that digital glow. So before and after, you can see the red skin tone, not that attractive. I prefer a more desaturated look to the images. I'm just going to bring that back a little bit, and what I want to do is just up the vibrance, and that'll bring back some of the tones in the other colors, like the blues in there, and also some of the background there. So generally I like to match vibrance with saturation, so I've got 25 25. All right, and then if I really like an edit that I've done, I'd like to save it. So what I'm going to do is I'll save this as a preset, and I'll call it Sicilian Grunge, I think. There we go, and I'll save it in... save it in gold. I'll give it to you guys at some point. So there you go. So now I have this preset that I've created. What Lightroom has done is it's taken all the settings that I've applied to this image and saved it as its own preset. So if I have another image, all I need to do now is just look for my new preset, click on it, and everything that I just did to that image except the crop. So I can apply my Sicilian Grunge now to any image that I want. There we go. So we got before and after. And that's just a good little way to save your presets if you particularly love a workflow that you've done where you're using it again and again and you're starting to develop a style. So there we go. Now, I'm pretty happy with that. I can either export it, or I want to show you how to edit this image now using Photoshop. So what I'm going to do is go down, right click on the image, go down and edit in, and I can either choose edit in Photoshop, but I want to show you something different. If we go down to open as smart object in Photoshop, it does something really cool. Here's the image opened up in Photoshop, and it looks exactly the same as the image that I just edited in Lightroom. That's because it is. So all the adjustments that I made to this image in Lightroom have been applied when I edit in Photoshop as a smart object. The only difference is when I come down here and click on the icon in the corner, which is the smart object thumbnail, double click on that, it opens up the Camera Raw dialog box. So basically what that means is all the settings that I've applied to my image in Lightroom have now been copied exactly into Camera Raw. And what's more is I can now continue to edit this image in Photoshop. So if I want to adjust it further, all I need to do is click on that little icon and I can. So I think it's really cool. Okay, so let's just see what we can do with this image a little more in Photoshop. So I'm just going to commit to that. And now I've got my smart object with all the adjustments in Camera Raw in there. And what I need to do now before I apply any more adjustments is create a duplicate layer. So the shortcut is Command J for that, or you can go to Layer, Duplicate Layer, and that'll do the same thing. All right, so we'll just get rid of that one. Now what I want to do is I need to flatten all these layers, and if I just go ahead and go to Layer, Flatten Image, I can no longer go back and edit down the track. If I want to come back and say, oh, I think I overdid it in the clarity or in a step. So a better way to edit and to allow many of the actions that I've created to work when you've got a smart object is to merge all of these layers up onto their own layer, and then you've got a new fresh starting point. So it's rather long, but the shortcut is Command Shift Option E. So now that I've got my new layer, what I'm going to do is come down here to the actions, and I'm going to use my shadow curves action, and I'm also going to create a highlights curve action. So there's darker and there's lighter, and what I'm going to do is a little bit of burning and dodging on this image. So I'm going to take a brush, make sure that white is selected to the foreground color, and that I've got my brush at a soft brush, so minimum hardness, and I'll just get a size that's appropriate, and I'll just come in a little bit. All right, and so what I'm going to do is just come in, and where I see darker areas, I'm going to make them a bit darker. I just want to increase the contrast a little bit, and because the light is really flat, I'm just going to give it a little bit more impact. So what I want to do is come around and just make sure my flow is also set to low, and I've got my opacity set at 100%, and I'm just going to come around and just brush around the sides of his face. I'm going to give his nose a bit more definition, and I'm not going to retouch his face. I actually want to bring out the detail rather than hide it, because I think this is more of a character shot and I really want to show off his character. And I'm just going to go around where there's some creases and just enhance those, and I also want to maybe bring out some definition on the arms. Alright, so it's just like painting really. The watch, bring out and just change the brush size as needed. All right, so you can just see, so there's before and after. It's subtle, and I can even just bring his face forward even more just by sending his chin back a little bit, and I'm just building this up subtly. All right, so where his tummy is coming forward a little bit, I can just paint that with a little bit of shadow there, and that'll actually make his tummy appear as if it's not coming forward as much. It just sends it back. Okay, so just a bit of, we'll bring in a bit of shadow into his hair, and just building it up. And maybe I can just bring some shadow here into the wall and maybe onto the floor and over to the side here, maybe deepen in there. And it's just all about making him stand out. All right, so let's have a look. So we've got before and after. So pretty much I've kind of brought the exposure in the background down a little bit without affecting his face, which is kind of like lighting a shot without lighting, using flat light. Okay, you can see that we've picked up on the contrast and the drama of that shot. Now I'm going to come in with my lighter layer and do the opposite areas. So where I want to bring in a little bit of a highlight and maybe bring his nose out a fraction, maybe bring his chin forward, the center of his forehead there. You can go over where there might be highlights in the hair and maybe make his hair look a bit shinier. So let's have a look. Before, after. It's subtle, but it all adds up. And then I can come in into the eyes and just go over those highlights there, just to make those stand out. So he's got some good catch lights in his eyes, but I can just bring out a little more detail. And I can enhance like even the lines around his eyes. And the opposite of that, if I wanted to, I could come in and where there's shadows, I could paint with light and diminish those shadows. So if I want to get rid of these darker patches under his eyes without losing the actual texture of the skin, I can just brush on with light, and it's just a more subtle way of either enhancing or reducing something. So I can put some little highlights there on his lips and then come back and maybe darken some areas, darken around his nostrils, the lines along the side of his face there. Just really want to bring out all the character, which if I lit this, a hard light would have done that. It would have been like, because it's harder light, a lot more contrast, but I'm doing it with light painting. And the other thing I like to do is just go around the eyes just to bring those out. So I like to just bring out some detail. Can even bring out Alright, so let's have a look now. So there's before, there's after, before, after. That's where we started. That's where we've come to now. The next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of clarity to the shot, but just in certain sections. So I've got an action here, True Grit Light, and basically what that's going to do is just grunge the whole image up. So there it is. Just bring that underneath. Alright, so that's True Grit Light, and what that does is it's added a bit of more texture in the midtones and a bit of like more, it desaturated it slightly. So I think it's good. It looks good on some areas. I don't want it on, like, let's say his shirt. I think it's too much. It's starting to show too much texture there, and it's looking a bit overdone. So what I can do now is create a layer mask and come in, and if I invert that, so that's Command I, changes it to black and hides it, and now I can come in again with a white brush. Alright, just, and now like got a soft brush, 10% flow, and I can just brush that in to the areas that I want it to be. So it's adding a little bit of contrast, a little bit of clarity to the midtones, and I can just select areas where there's texture that I want to bring out, like maybe the eyes. So let's have a look. We've got before, after, very subtle, but great, and like areas like hair. And I might actually just do his whole face, because I just like bringing out the gritty look in his face. So see that? That's before, that's after. Subtle. But I like it. So that's where we started with an edit in Lightroom. And that's where we ended up. Now I could probably finish up there, or I could go a step further. What I'm going to do is actually add maybe a bit of toning to this one. So what I'm going to do is again bring this all up onto its own layer. So Command Option Shift E, new layer. So basically I've merged all these layers underneath up onto their own layer, and what I'm going to do now is go to color lookup. Color lookup, or LUT's lookup table, is like a preset or an action, and it's going to give you a similar effect in color grading like the ones you see in movies. So in post-production, movies are color graded to give them a certain look, like you see here in Gatsby, and also other movies like Les Mis and The Matrix and Fight Club. And what I love about them is it's just a really cool way to add a subtle yet distinct look to your portraits. All right, so let's have a look at how that's done. So I've got my new layer selected. So that's Command Shift Option E will combine all the layers that I've been working on up into their own layer. I come down to my create new fill layer. So it's that circle with it's white and black. So click on that and scroll down to color lookup. Click on that, you'll get a new dialog box, and what you're looking at is the 3D LUT file, and you want to click on load 3D LUT. So you can just scroll down, you can see there's lots of different options, and so it might be worth just getting a photo out and having a play around with them. One of the most popular ones that you might recognize is this teal and orange look, and you see this in lots of movies where you see that the highlight areas are really orange and the shadows are usually like a blue color, and it's a really common theme in a lot of different movies. So when it's applied at 100%, it's not fantastic. One that I like is edgy amber, so I like to play around with that. So I find that once I first apply it, it can look not fantastic, but there's lots of things we can do with the mask to reduce that effect, and also using opacity in the layers just to give a subtle hint, and that's where it's really good. So I've applied it, not looking fantastic, but what I can do is reduce the opacity. So slide that back and you can see it starts to look a lot better, and I think around 20% is enough. What I want is just to create a bit of warmth in my skin tones, and maybe have the other areas being, I want to have maybe blue in the background. So what I can do is I can come in with a black brush and remove the areas that I don't want the effect to appear. And you can see in the mask, as I'm brushing on, you can see the black areas are where I'm taking that effect away. The better way to do it is I can invert the layer, so Command I, and that inverts it, turns it to black, and now I can just brush in the areas that I want so with white as my foreground color. So I just want to brush onto the skin tone and onto the arms. So just brush that in, and so I'm just basically painting with that amber effect on the skin tone, and I might do his whole body as well, see what that looks like. And sometimes I just come in and just play around and see what looks good. Sometimes I take it away. So just brush that over his whole body, and you can see in the mask as I'm painting where it's affected. So you got before and after, and so now I want to come back in and get rid of the areas that I brushed on before in the background. So you can see I've changed my brush to black, and I'll come in and just brush that away and make sure I get rid of all of it, and just bring up my flow so it's a bit quicker. You can see in the mask that the areas that I'm now brushing with black, it's taking away the amber effect that I just applied. So once that all goes away, okay, just brushing all around, and so you can just see in the mask that it's just really on his body, that amber effect. All right, and so now I can come back in, and I might just see what these arches look like. So I might warm those up, and the floor around him as well, because I think it might be nice just to have the whole front part of the image a bit warm, and then I might cool down the background. That might be the effect that I'm going for. So I just warm up the walls here. All right. Just brush in, so you can see, like, I just keep checking my mask so I know that I'm getting all the areas that I need to. So I've got all of the arch area, all of my model's body and his face. And what I might do now is, I don't really like what it's doing to the color of his shirt, so I might now just paint with black and remove that off his shirt. So it's just bringing the shirt back to the natural color. I think that looks a bit better. It was a bit over the top, so now it's looking a lot more natural. And you can see in the mask there that now I've taken it off his entire body, so it's really just on the face and the arms and a little bit on the arch. All right, and so you can see if I bring it up the effect, but I just keep it around 20. I think that looks good there. Before, after. All right, so happy with that. Now I'm going to add maybe a cool tone to this background area here in the arch. So I come down to color lookup, load, and I'm going to go with Moonlight. And you can see it's not fantastic when you start, but I really like the effect. I like that cool tone on the background, but it is a bit over the top at 100%. So I just want to bring in some blue tones into that background. So I'm just going to lower the opacity. I just sort of play around till I see something that I like. That's probably too much. And you can see it's also affecting the entire shot, not just the background. So what I want to do is get rid of it on the rest of it. So I'm going to invert the mask, Command I, and now you can see that it's not affecting anything. And now come in with a white brush and just brush in the blue in the background. So just slowly working around, just filling it in. And it is, I think at 52%, it's a lot heavier than I'd like it to be. That tint, it's a bit over the top, so I can come back later and knock that back. So just come back in with a small brush, just making sure I'm getting all the areas around there. And once I'm happy with that, you can see the mask area. Do it a lot more carefully if I wasn't recording at the same time, but just coming in, trying to pick up all those little areas. And because it's a nice soft brush, you can kind of be doesn't have to be super careful, but you just want to make sure that you don't have a halo around his body, so I have missed a few spots there, so I'll just come back in and just brush those little spots that I've missed, moving a bit quickly, but you get the general idea. So got that nice blue coming in. All right, so you got before and after, and I'll probably just knock it back. That's looking better there, about 20%. I didn't want it to be over the top, so that's a bit more subtle now. Go less. Not enough. Just going back and forth till I find something that I'm happy with. That looks pretty good. A little bit more. And that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to come back to my amber, so you can see that how they're both looking there, and that's where I started. Then I started adding my adjustment layers, some burning and dodging, a little bit of warmth, a little bit of clarity, new layer, and color look up here, the amber, and I might just knock that back a little bit more subtle. Come in with the blue. Might just put those all into their own folder so we can see quickly before. That's just the Lightroom. And after, with all the Photoshop actions there. So, you know, it's subtle, but I think it makes a big difference, and it certainly takes images to the next level.